So any kind of problem that we encounter in everyday life, there's usually so many ways that we try to solve them, or we're really interested in solving our problems. And problems, could be anything. It could be that, I don't know, I'm not happy in my relationship. It could be that I feel I'm not good enough. It could be I'm afraid of failure. Fear plays a big role in life in general for many people. Yeah, it can be any problem, you name it, and it's like this. So what we usually do is there's a problem arising, and it can come in many different ways. It can come to us through thoughts. It can come to us through feelings or emotions. It can come to us many times even without us being aware. It's like almost like it's sort of just being there, and we just encounter a problem. And that's an interesting thing as well, isn't it? That problems, they just sort of, like, most of the times we just find ourselves in the problem, and we don't even notice that it's coming or how it comes into existence in a way. And then when there is a problem, we are trying to find a solution, and on the level of the problem. And that's exactly the sort of challenge that never works, because it's too late. Meaning, we have bought into an idea that we actually have nothing to do with at all, but we have bought into it. And that's where we will be able to find a solution, or we're trying to find a solution. We spend a lot of time and energy finding it. So, let's say there's a problem coming, and most of the times the problem is sort of in our head, and let's say we worry about something. So we worry about something, and then what we do is we think more. We use more thinking to overcome the problem, because something in us says we're convinced, or I'm convinced that I can find the solution to the problem in thought. But we don't see in that moment that actually the problem is on the level of thought. And that's what, this famous quote from Einstein is exactly saying. So we try to solve a problem that is within thought. We try to solve it with thought. And in a way, to really solve a problem, we have to, in a way, go back one level, not on the same level where it exists, it comes into existence, but go back a level. Or like another example is, let's say we have trouble in the relationship, and then what we do is we I don't know, try to talk to the person, try to talk out to our friends, but we don't go deep enough to see whether we actually really have something to do with this problem. And so what I'm saying is, in a way, you take any problem that you perceive, that you are aware of, that you feel like you're in, and it's almost like a rope, and there's many knots, and we try to basically, like, you could describe life in a way that it's a rope with many, many knots, and we try to unknot many of them. So, because when there's not many knots in the rope, we feel better. And there's one big knot, I believe, that if we sort of clear that, all the other problems will be solved. And that's the key. So, and that's what we're speaking about here. And it's so obvious, that knot, that we overlook it all the time. And that knot is basically to take ourselves to be something that we're not. And I want to tell a story. Maybe some of you have already heard about that story, but when I heard that story for the first time, I was like, what? I don't understand at all. It's ridiculous, that story. But it helped me immensely, like, to see many, many different things. So the story goes as follows. So there's a man, and his best friend comes to him and says, hey, you know what? Your wife is cheating on you. And he's like, he can't believe it. He's like, how is that possible? My wife would never do something like that. She's very loyal, and she's super nice and everything. So he can't believe it. He's completely lost. He's shocked, and he doesn't know what to do. So he's asking his friends, so I don't know, like, how do you know? Who told you? Or and he said, yeah, I saw it myself with my own eyes. she met his lover somewhere, and I saw them in a cafe, and yeah, he's just like, he can't even think clear. So he's like wondering, what should he do? Should he address his wife when he sees her next, or should he just not mention it? Should he ignore it? Should he, I don't know, confront her? Should he shoot her? I don't know. He's like just crazy, going crazy in thoughts, right? And super worried about his future and the past, and many different things. So his friend says, "Hey, you know what? I know they are going to meet at the church tonight." And so his wife and the lover, and then you can see with your own eyes whether it's true or not, and what you can do. So he's completely messed up. He doesn't know what to do. He has no clear thought anymore, and that's exactly, in a way, how we usually encounter problems, right? So yeah, then he decides finally to go to the church. Like, he knows this tree where he's going to wait for the two to come, and he wants to catch them in action to really see whether it's true or not. So he, all he does on that day, he thinks about his wife cheating on him, and he's he's just out of it. He doesn't know what to do. He's very nervous, very anxious. He thinks, he still constantly thinks whether he should confront them or not. So he goes there on the street. They said they will meet at midnight. So he goes there already at 11 just to make sure he doesn't miss it. And he's constantly thinking, what if they hear about that he will be there, and then maybe they don't show up. So he's very anxious, and more problems come. So then finally it's midnight, and he's sitting on his tree, and he's looking at the church, and nobody's there yet. So he's like, oh, they probably found out that he's coming, and then they are meeting somewhere else. So that's all the stuff that's going through his head. And then at 12:15, still nobody has showed up. His palms are sweaty. He's just totally out of it. He doesn't know what to do. He's so concerned, like, for his entire life. And so it's 12:30, still no one has shown up. He's even a bigger mess. And then, I don't know, it's 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and at some point he's so exhausted from waiting and being in all these emotions that he just, I don't know, he just falls down and falls asleep. And then 1 hour later he wakes up, and he's like, where am I? And then he wakes up with a smile and realizes what fool he was, what he was doing, and he realizes that he was not married. And I love this story because it exactly shows, in my opinion, what we're doing here all day long. Like it's so beautiful, the story, because when I first heard it, I was like, wow, it's so ridiculous, this story, because obviously, why would he not know that he's not married? Like, it's so obvious, right? But this is exactly how obvious it is to us that we are not what we take ourselves to be, and that which then causes all the suffering. It's exactly like that. We worry about what's going to happen tomorrow. We worry about what happened in the past. We feel guilty, for what we didn't do and what we should have done, what other people tell us we should do. And we carry like this image of ourselves, what we are supposed to be. And we're constantly trying to defend and maintain that image and make it better. And we go into so many problems because the starting point is not where we actually are. So the starting point is not what we are or who we are, but it starts with what we're supposed to be, or what I think other people may think of me, or what I should do according to society, to my parents, to teachers, to my friends. What am I supposed to be? And so it's like an image we have about ourselves that's shaped by all these different environments. And it's exactly like this. So what we do is we try to solve the problems for that image that we have built. And obviously, we will never find a solution, but the solution is already there, and it's lying in exactly that, what we already are. And nothing is required to be what we already are. We don't have to maintain an image. Look, the most exhausting part in life is exactly that. to maintain an image of what we think we are, and to keep that, to keep that maintained during our days. And we spend so much energy and time on that. Like, we think about ourselves as this body mind in the future, and we think, oh my God, what's going to happen? I'm separate from everything. I have to make sure I have enough money. I have to make sure I have good relationships. I have to make sure I have a job. I have to make sure, and I have to make sure I'll be happy. There's this whole list of things that we feel like we have to do, and we have to make sure. And we never actually questioned whether we have anything to do with that. And my point here is, my humble reminder to you is that not to believe anything that I say, but to question, to be able to question the most fundamental thing of who you really are. And there's something that resonates in all of us. So mainly, like, there's this sentence which I really like, is be what you cannot not be. Be what you cannot not be is the complete opposite of, hey, you know what? Be the best that you can be. Like, unleash your full potential. That's all. Unleash your full potential. Be the best you can be. I don't know, one day you'll be enlightened. One day you'll be the superstar. One day you have a lot of money. One day you have a family. One day you'll be happy. That's all, like, that's all giving hope in the future. And when we follow this hope in the future, we are very manipulated. We're buying things, we are, and we really believe in that hope. Like, we give all our self-worth, we put into this bucket, and we really hope that one day everything will be better. But guess what? Like, because we feel like a lack inside, because we are identifying with an image that we have nothing to do with, and that's extremely hard to maintain for everyone who identifies with an image. It's like a constant war and fight every day. There are moments, of where we're happy. There's moments of when we're sad, but it's a constant fight. So instead of, trying to make this image better of what we think we are, it's more like just of a reminder of who we already are, which doesn't require anything. It doesn't require anything because it's already so. And that's like a whole different ball game than constantly trying to become something that we can never actually reach because we are already there, So it's an amazing thing. And as I said, this story with the man who's not married, the thing is, when, like, that's one of the biggest things. When we hear a message like this, a reminder of who we really are, something like the self-image listens to that, and that's exactly where in a way, why it's so hard to understand this message, because we hear it not as what we are, but we hear it as what we believe to be. So we hear messages from outside, and we hear them as the self-image. And what I usually describe as this analogy with the screen and the movie and an action figure. So we take ourselves to be that action figure in the movie. We hear that message and say, hey, wow, I don't have to do anything. I am already what I'm looking for. And we take that message as the action figures and take it, be like, oh yeah, one day I can be like this. Although the words are saying you are already the way you are, and nothing is wrong with you, and you don't have to change anything. But we hear that as the action figure and say, shit, how do I get there? That's the first reaction. How do I get there? But that tells you, that reaction says, this, how do I get there, doesn't come from what you are. That comes from the action figure. So it's almost like an elimination. Like, if there was any approach, which I don't think there is actually a path, because you can't go on a path to where you are. But if at all, the methodology would be to eliminate everything you see on the board game, in a way, not to take it for yourself. And I think that's so beautifully illustrated in that story that I was telling with the man who's not married, because he could have he could have found solutions, to his wife cheating on him. He could have found solutions within, after that thought, after the identification of, okay, I'm married. He bought into this idea of I'm married without questioning it, because his best friend was telling him, so he didn't even switch it on. And then he could have found good solutions. He could have gone to a therapist, he could have had a good conversation with his wife, or he could have been divorced, but it would have taken forever and it would have never been resolved fully. And that's sort of how we go about our days. We try to solve the problems constantly after we have believed something, and it's a fundamental belief. And that's why I love the story, because the solution is so much easier, right? The solution for him was to no longer buy into the idea that he is married. That was the solution. And guess what? That was the ultimate solution. There was no residue in that solution. And that's exactly what I'm sort of trying to point at, is taking this analogy onto our own life. We take ourselves to be an image, and for this image, everything is a problem. Life is happening to this image. So somebody says something, it's about us. We take it to us and we think constantly, what do they mean by this? Why should I, what should I do? Should I do this and this? And that's already too late. That's a whole mess already. So the solution to this is not to find ways to cope with what's happening, but it's finding ways to question what you take yourself to be. And that's exactly the point. And it's so hard for us to question the most fundamental things, because there are so many assumptions about what we are, the closest to of what we are. There's so many assumptions that we don't have the ability to question it, and we don't dare. It's almost like let's say there's this whole discussion about fake news in the media. So there's the mainstream news, there's alternative news, and in a way, the mainstream news is sort of trying to monopolize the truth, right? And in another way, the alternative news, they're trying to monopolize the truth as well and say these are the bad guys, and these. So both are trying to do the same thing. And in a way, it requires some kind of like being brave and going your own way, because if you go with the mass, it's gonna be tough, because there are so many unspoken assumptions that we will never be able to question what we fundamentally are. And that's the key here, because in a way it sounds ridiculous to a let's say a mind that has been shaped by society. It sounds ridiculous that, oh, you're not this body and this mind and you're not this action figure. It cannot digest that message at all. And to what we truly are, let's call it awareness. When awareness hears, hey, you're not the body mind, it's like, yeah, obviously, like, well, it's obvious. So in a way, that message is not even needed, but it requires like a really open mind. And yeah, hold on, there's just a comment on Instagram. Marriage is only a good thing when it comes hand in hand with freedom and truth. Yeah, maybe we didn't actually speak about marriage so much, but it's more about, but what you're saying obviously is right. But we're talking about more an analogy where, yeah, it's about an identification. So anyway, so what we're doing here, again, like, this is more like a reminder of what we already are. And that's why, this is not an exciting message to what we think we are. And this is not about how can I become a millionaire, or how, like, all the messages that promise something in the future, they're very exciting for us. Like, there are some kind of, scientists, they would say there are some kind of chemicals happening and they're trying to excite us to something. But this is what we're talking about here. It has nothing to do with it. It's actually the opposite. But guess what? Instead of having short-term excitements and ups and downs, which every excitement in a way brings also a big down with itself, Instead of that, what we're talking about here, we're pointing towards something that's always so, and in a way, it's, you know, it's filled with peace, and it's the peace that is not a peace of mind that we try to find and calm our minds down, but it's a given, it's our true nature, it's the true nature of everything that is right now, right here. And yeah, that's the beauty of the message. So I wanted to speak about, there's like one of the most interesting subjects I took at university was called logic. It's a subject in philosophy, and it's called logic. So maybe some of you are familiar with it. So basically, logic talks about, you know, for instance, Socrates is a human. Humans are mortal, so Socrates is mortal. So it's basically a logic how we make arguments. And one of the, it's a really interesting matter because it helps you to open up and see that in a way these philosophers are saying, and it's really true when you really go deep into it, there's actually no such thing as a true or false argument. Like, okay, there's no such thing as a true argument. You can never, a true argument doesn't exist because there's always so many uh, underlying assumptions, premises. Like, that's why. And that's really interesting because, you know, scientists or, I don't know, politicians or anyone, you know, even in our daily relationships, we always pretend like it's always about the question of who is right and who is wrong, right? And every conflict is in a way based on that. And and you know, even when we read the newspaper or when we hear someone's opinion or anything, we always tend to believe, okay, there's a right way and there's a wrong way. And it's a really interesting thing because the moment we realize that there's actually no such thing as right and wrong, we can actually start to relax because we don't have to continuously go about life and always check who's right and who's wrong. And this can, you know, as I said, we waste a lot of energy into going into that. But when we truly look at that, and yeah, when we truly look at arguments or constantly trying to correct people or saying, no, this is right, no, this is wrong, and to see through, you know, because most people, especially when it comes to politics, but even in relationships, there are so many agendas going on. And it's amazing to see through those because the best thing is, you know, we are able to stay calm. There's no emotional reactions. And that's one of the most beautiful things that we can have in everyday life, that no matter what thoughts come to us that are from our own, what we usually believe, or when we read something in a newspaper or when somebody confronts us with something, there's no such thing as, oh, this is right or this is wrong. And that gives a huge relief in my eyes to life in general. So yeah, so I want to talk a bit about more. So if you guys have any questions, you can anytime ask me. But yeah, logic is a really interesting thing because logic also helps, you know, so let's go into this because it's really interesting. So when it comes to that question, like to identity, I think in school, obviously, we have never learned to see what we are or to see what we're not. Never, right? It's almost like, you know, this body is born, it grows up, it's constantly shaped by the parents, by the environment, by everything. And then we go to school, but it's constantly under influence of the environment and, you know, school and everything. But at no stage have we ever truly and sincerely questioned what we truly are. Because there's the notion, we automatically take over that notion of, oh yeah, of course, you know, I'm operating this body and this mind, and from there's my starting point. And this whole message here is that maybe this is not the case, but this is such a, you know, such a tough thing to do for most of us because it's so it has become like a second skin for us, that we're this body mind, and it's so hard for most of us to question that. But that's exactly where it gets really exciting in a way, because when we actually do, like, let's take thoughts for instance. It's a very common thing, obviously. It happens all the time. So a thought stream. So we usually believe without having ever reflected on it, right? It's almost like, yeah, most of us, when we are growing up, we are fully identified with the thought stream. Like, there's a thought stream, and something in us, it's a presupposing, is that these thoughts come from us and are about us. And so what we believe is there's a thinker, and that's us, and we produce thoughts, right? So we can all follow that. But guess what? When you closely observe, without, and like, forget all your knowledge that you've ever had, that you acquired, just sit down and just observe purely what's happening. And when you observe purely what's happening, and you have the guts to question everything, then you would notice that thoughts that just arise, whether I'm trying to think something or not, they just arise. But guess what? Also from logic, from philosophy, what I just said, there's something called a confirmation bias. And the confirmation bias, it's super interesting because it says anything we believe, let's say I believe that the world is flat, okay? So if I believe that the world is flat, then I take every evidence that is out there to support my statement, I take this to be true and focus on that. And any evidence that goes against that statement, I disregard. So every time, and that becomes like a pattern, like automatic. And so it's obvious, then I will meet people, who have the same belief, and we will speak about how the others are stupid, that they believe the world has this shape. So this is how it works for everything. You can take, I don't know, religion, you can take society, you can believe politics, and when it comes to yourself as well. So I think that's a fascinating thing. And even they say, even scientific studies are done after the same principle, because there's no such thing as an objective scientific study if you believe the philosophers who study logic. But we're not interested in the theories here. We're interested in, how this can, in a way, free what is already free, in a way. So the confirmation bias, so if you question that, what are thoughts? The confirmation bias, there's a belief in us that says, no, but it cannot be. Like, thoughts are, I've always believed that thoughts are for me. My whole family, my friends, my school, they all say that. People in society, celebrities, they think that, so it must be like that. I cannot be crazy to think it's not like that. And that has a big influence on exactly that, what we believe. So the thing is, which is very close to us, again, observing thoughts, we're so obsessed and so identified with thoughts that it's impossible for us to create a distance to thoughts and understand and really observe them. But some of us, let's say it could be through some meditation practice or being in nature or whatever, we're able to observe thoughts as not being our own, but just as objects that come and go. Yeah, they're not visible, but they're objects that come and go, and we can observe them with a distance. And we have all experienced it always, because that's our experience. It's not like, you have to train for 10 years to do that. It's bullshit, we don't have to do that. It's something that's our experience, whether we are aware of it or not. But then to observe that, if you ask me, that's one of the biggest freedoms. That's the biggest freedom we can have, is to be free of believing that we're the thinker of thoughts and that the thoughts are about us. Because if you think about the problems that you have right now, think about something that worries you right now. When you don't think about it, it's not there. You can also go to on a feeling level. It's the same. Thoughts and feelings, they come and go. When you don't feel or when you don't think, it doesn't exist, the problem. And yeah, it's just amazing. So what happens is, you know, so there's thoughts happening. Thoughts are happening. And just because there are thoughts happening, it's like, you know, some of the tribes, they explain the weather in a way that there's a weather maker, somebody who they cannot buy into the idea that there's just a weather happening, sunshine is happening, rain is happening. They think there must be a person or some god that's dedicated to the rain or the sun, and so there's a rainmaker, or this is, you know, the one who is responsible for the sun or whatever. And so there has to be a person to do that. And the same way, it's the same way for us. We have to have a thinker. We cannot buy into the idea that there's just a thought coming. We're always looking, there's a thought, an object, and there has to be a subject, one who thinks it. It's exactly the same as the tribes who believe there has to be someone who makes the weather. Exactly the same. So what happens is, there's a thought coming, and then there's a claiming happening right after, saying, I'm the thinker. So the image we identify with is, and you know, the body plays a huge role in this whole identification, is because we picture a body in the past, we picture a body in the future, and we give the body all these attributes to make it so in the now. And that's sort of how we're creating reality. And yeah, like I think I gave this example last time. If it was true, you know, if we had free will and control over our body and thoughts, and let's assume we had full control, I think me and most other people, probably all of them, we would die within a few minutes, because guess what? We would have to pump the blood, we would have to split the cells, we would have to, I don't know, breathe, we would have to do so, digest, we have to do so many things. And I would just, I don't know, speak to a friend and I would forget everything. So, you know, it's kind of insane what we believe that we are in control of and that we have to do with, where we have nothing to do with at all. Like we have nothing to do with at all. But so the problems that, you know, all the problems that we have every day, they're just a result of this wrong identification of something that we believe to be and we have nothing to do with. Even like you know, as I said, this image of ourselves, it's not just an image, it's a feeling, it's a state of mind, it feels as if it's real, but it's only always seemingly so. And yeah, it's just like, in a way, insane what's happening, and you know, so much suffering in the world. And that's caused, if you ask me, by taking everything to happen to us. And as I said, you know, like sort of one of the main analogies I use is the screen and the movie and the action figure in the movie. So what, like, in a way, we are the world, we are paradise, like literally, and not in the future. Like right now, it's not reserved to an elite, it's right now, right here. And we take ourselves, like we are the screen in that analogy, and the screen, and the movie is happening. So the movie is happening at all the action figures, all the emotions, you know, all the drama and the stories, and you know, everything that's happening constantly, that's happening. And so what we do is, we believe we have entered the movie as the action figure truthfully, and by entering the movie, that's what brings all the problems. So it's something in us believes, no, guess what? If I have a big enough house, if I have a big enough job, if I have enough money on my account, then I'll be fine in the movie as the action figure. You know, and I have believed that for a long time. So at the beginning, when I started into this in my teenage years, I resonated a lot with what I'm talking about here. but I always used it as a strategy for the action figure to have a better life, to travel lighter as the action figure. And I always used it as a tactic, and it works to some degree, but it doesn't work at all. So the only, in a way, radical solution is exactly that: not to buy into the idea that we have ever entered the movie as the action figure, and in a way, try it out. If you're blissed all day and you are fully in the movie, that's great. But guess what? What I'm saying is, it's not that, that's the funny thing. In a way, you cannot become the screen as the action figure, obviously, right? But what happens is, you are the screen, and then the action figure is fully engaged in life. Because what happens a lot is, we enter the movie as the action figure, and we are scared and very careful of what can happen, because we are vulnerable. As soon as we enter the movie as the action figure, we can get hurt, we can die, we can be afraid, we can be better than others, we compare ourselves, and so on. And that's exactly the dilemma. So we cannot live fully, we cannot express emotions, we cannot just fully do something. Has given this action figure a vision, and it wants to be creative and wants to do things, and just get fully involved in everything. But guess what? We have to be very cautious, because something can happen to this action figure. And guess what? When we understand, when we see clearly, it's not an understanding. When we see clearly that we have nothing to do with this action figure is free, and it's finally fully able to engage in everything that's coming. And that's the beauty of it. Usually we think it's either or, and in a way it is, but by seeing that you are the screen and the action figure is doing its thing, finally there's the action figure is free, and that's immensely beautiful. That's basically it. Do you have any questions? You can write in Instagram or in Zoom. You can just tell me. And maybe I can say another thing. So there is, so in a way, when you have questions of why and how, for me, this is usually an escape of the action figure trying to escape what it already is. Because when we ask how, like you could ask now, the question could come and say, hey, how do I get there? But as I just pointed out, the action figures will never be able to get there, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to get there, because it's already the screen. So instead of, when this question comes up, arises in you, just let it arise, and then see who does it arise to. Like really see through the logic of this experience, of the perception. Okay, here are some questions, and there's a few questions. So Paola is saying practicality. Yeah, like maybe how does one intertwine this into non-duality? So yeah, non-duality is non-duality means basically not two, and as I said, non-duality means that there's not two entities, right? There's not two, and in a way, when we hear this message, it sounds sometimes very abstract or very, maybe not very practical. But when we truly see what's happening, and when we're able to ask those fundamental questions, in my eyes, it's the most practical thing. Because what happens is, we take this message sincerely, we don't just theorize about it, and we apply it in a way. we take it radically in our life and in situations, and we just dive into it. And then what happens is it becomes extremely practical, and you know, it changes your life completely as the action figure. That's the beauty, because in a way the screen is formless anyway. But in a, yeah, we're interested in, you know, also giving the action figure freedom, and that's the most practical thing ever. And how does it intertwine into non-duality? You know, there's many people claim that you can actually speak about non-duality and everything, but we cannot, because non-duality just means not two. And I think we can only speak about duality. And in a way, it's more like, and I think that that links beautifully to that, is we can not talk about who we are, or we cannot talk about non-duality, because we are it. We can be it, but we cannot talk about it because it's not an object. It's what I said earlier. There's the form and the formless. There's duality, which is the form, and non-duality, which is the screen. So we cannot try to describe which doesn't have a form, but the beauty is that we are the formless, and from that, when we no longer identify ourselves with the form, with the action figure gets the energy in a way from the formless, and that's I think the beauty. Exactly. So Paula is also saying it's impossible to word expand on that. So hold on, there's more questions. Starlight Galaxies is saying, I didn't understand the logic part and things not being true. Okay, so yeah, let's go into that. So I said earlier that that you can say that any argument or any fact that is out there is true, anything. And you can also argue that any fact or any argument is false. Why is that? Because let's take, for instance, and you have to also have to understand, so there's something called deductive arguments and inductive arguments. A deductive argument is something that people say you cannot question it because it's, as I said earlier, Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, so Socrates is mortal. That's, they say it's a deductive argument and you can argue that, but you could still, because the two premises at the beginning, they have many assumptions in them. You can say, for instance, okay, it's just because all men have died before doesn't mean that maybe there is somebody who has never died or in the future, right? So there's always premises, because it's words, you know, words can be argued about. But most arguments that you find in media or also in science are inductive arguments, and those are, you know, you can also test, I don't know, you can say 25, I don't know, you put 25, I don't know, rabbits in the garden, and they were all running at a certain speed, and then you make an assumption and say rabbits, they can run at this speed, and they say, look, rabbits, they can maximum run at this speed, but then maybe there's a rabbit somewhere else in the world and it runs faster, you know. So I don't know if that answers your question, but if you really go deep into that, you understand that there's no such thing. Oh, look what I said earlier, this one combined with the confirmation bias. So like, if somebody believes the craziest thing in the world, they will find physical and psychological evidence that this is true. So let's say somebody has, I mean, this way you can also explain fear. Someone is afraid of heights, let's say. They believe that if they go on a bridge, that they probably will die because maybe they step down, I don't know what happens, but they're convinced that if they go on another bridge, they will die, right? But for another person, this is not true. And in a way, I mean, fear is linked to emotions a lot, but as I said, there's people out there who believe like, okay, before Galilei, there was a common understanding that the world is flat, right? So if you asked any normal person, people would have said, yeah, the earth is flat. And that was the truth, right? The people wouldn't have argued it. And now, at some point, Galileo said, no, guess what? The world is round. It's a ball. And he was killed for that. He was killed for saying that. And then today, the common, knowledge is that the Earth is basically not flat, but it's a ball. But there are people today who say the opposite. They say still it's flat, So, and those people, they will make up arguments, and maybe there's some kind of logic behind. But yeah, there's no such thing as wrong and right. But why I'm saying that as well is because we usually, we waste so much energy in trying to convince others about that our opinion is the right one. And this game of right and wrong, it takes so much energy from our everyday life. But if you really look closely, it's not about the argument so much, but it's more about, there's a lot of self-worth in there. We try to belong to others. We try to be good in argumentation. We try to, there's so many other things in there. So I hope that answers it a bit. There's another question of alone. Should we think as the screen rather than the body-mind? I don't understand the question. Can you rephrase it? Should we think as the screen rather than... I think I get it. So should we think as a screen rather than the body-mind? The screen in this analogy cannot think. That's in a way what I said. We try. It's in spirituality. The biggest fallacy, in my eyes, is that, and people are so into this. So they identify as the action figure. So they are the screen. They take themselves as the action figure without ever questioning it. And then we try to become the screen as the action figure. And we cannot think as the screen because the screen doesn't think. It's not a thing, it's not an entity, it's formless. There are thoughts coming, but in a way, when there's an awareness of what we truly are and seeing through that we are not a thing, that are the thinker, then there's a quality that is released, that in a way there is a global thinking happening, because you are able to entertain thoughts that you don't necessarily agree with. It's like a global thinking, and in a way you could say that this is happening to the action figure, but yes, it's like that. So there's another one, we can only perceive what we can see or feel, basically. Exactly. So we can only, exactly. So that's a really interesting point, because what we usually do is the following. So the seeing and the hearing and the whole perception, right? Tasting, touching and everything is facilitated by the body-mind. So what happens is, because there's seeing happening through this body, we take this body to be the thing, the subject. Although it's an object. It's an object because it can be perceived. The body-mind can be perceived. But we overlook that a lot. So what happens is, when we look from here as the subject, then life is a struggle every day. No matter how great it is, it's a struggle. But when we're able to be in the awareness, which we are, we don't have to try anything to do that, and we are dwelling in that, then we see this here as an object, and we no longer mistake it as a subject, and that brings immense relaxation. And that's exactly that's the biggest, in a way, the hardest thing for most of us, because it's so hard for us to imagine that we are not something, it's in a way invisible. So, it's like, I think I said it last time, it's like some somebody is playing the violin, a musician, okay? And taking ourselves to be the body, which is an object, it's almost like as if the violin would say, I am making the music. I was writing the music and I'm playing the music right now. And it would say, hey, look, if somebody says, but come on, you see that you're not moving the hand and stuff. He was like, what do you mean? What hand? And he would say, look, where does the sound come from? It comes from me, right? So I'm the one who makes the music. It's exactly like that. There's a seeing, there's a hearing, but there's just a seeing and there's no hearer or seer in this body. Obviously, if you open this body, no surgeon or anyone has ever found like a center that says, I am the one, you know? It's not, you cannot find it because it's not there. So there's seeing happening, but the body facilitates seeing, and in a way it's almost like there are like 7 or 8 billion cameras from awareness that is sort of, you know, looking at the world to just explore what's happening. But yeah, so whatever can be perceived is not that which is perceiving. It's like, you know, this example of if my tongue was made of salt and I put salt on it, or if you think about your tongue and it's made out of salt and you put salt on it, would you taste anything? And the answer is no, because the same cannot be aware of the same. So that's why, by this definition, what form cannot perceive form. There has to be something else to perceive it. And that's exactly what we are. You know, and that's the funny thing. What we're talking about here, it doesn't have to be produced. It's already there. Like, don't believe in, you know, one day you will achieve it. It's already there. Like, you're swimming in it. It's like filled everywhere. And that's the beauty of it. So there was also a question in Zoom. You mentioned earlier questioning what we assume ourselves to be. We are doing it as the action figure, the screen, or the unity where we are both. So you mentioned earlier questioning what we assume ourselves to be. Are we doing it as the action figure, the screen, or as... So basically what happens is there is a recognition. Obviously, it's not happening from the action figure because the action figure is an imaginary I. It doesn't exist. So it happens, it's a recognition, it's a seeing through, obviously, from like consciousness is aware of itself. And what happens is there's a seeing that, you know, it's like, I give this example sometimes. I love this analogy. So I had believed in Santa Claus when I was a kid. And I think many of us have. And so I have strongly believed in Santa Claus. So what happened one day in kindergarten, there was a neighbor of mine, he was dressed up as Santa Claus. And I recognized him. So I was like, hold on, I know this guy. So what are they trying to do here? And then I was suspicious, but I still continued to believe in it because, I don't know, maybe I thought there was just some joke going on or something. And then it was my mother, she was trying to hide the gifts for Christmas, and she said, I don't know, whoever, the Santa Claus came and brought a gift or something. And I saw her getting the gifts and putting it under the tree. So again, I was like, hold on, what's going on? Something suspicious is going on here. So it's almost like that in a way that, you know, and 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 times, it's enough to see that mechanism that's happening, that this action figure takes itself to be a separate, long-lasting entity, independent from everything else. And it's enough to see that mechanism happening in life, and you catch it because this is happening in you. You are awareness, and this action figure, you're the screen, and the movie is happening, right? So you catch it before there's such an obsession, you know, with taking ourselves to be this, and we can't even see far. And then there's some kind of space, and then you catch yourself while this mechanism is happening, you know, there's a thought coming and you claim to be the thinker, for instance. And let's say, you know, yeah, let's say there's a thought coming that worries you, and you see that you have nothing to do with thought. At this moment, it's so beautiful because it gives freedom like this, and it reminds you of what you are. And yeah, so it's like this example. And here's another comment that has already existed, the music, for example. It has already existed, the music, for example. Yeah, like in this example, like it's like this, you know, it's like what's happening here. So awareness is there. The violin, in this case, would also claim to be, yeah, it would claim to create the music. But as you said, the music is already there. Awareness is already there. So in the same way, the action figure believes that it, like, you know, that's the common understanding in society today, is that we give awareness, we think that's an attribute or a function that the body mind has, right? That's like in a way extremely arrogant uh, because yeah, it's like the violin pretending that it's the music, that it's creating the music. And well, and even neuroscientists today, you know, the more they find out about all these things, they see that consciousness is not a function of the body mind. And it's just, you know, it's just like a switch. It's like, you know, this example of the horses and the cart. Usually when we take ourselves to be the action figure, the horses are behind the cart and they're constantly pushing them, pushing, and it's a failed system. And what we're sort of saying is, hey, just look and put the horses in front of us. See that the horses have never been behind the cart. They have always been in front of the cart. It's just go in the other direction. So it's like so obvious, you know, it's so close. It's closer. The solution is closer to us than thoughts or feelings. But it's just, yeah, so hard for us in many instances to see this most obvious thing because we're so busy and concerned with you know, with something that we have nothing to do with. And all of this is very exciting, you know. And but at some point, you know, for all of us who are here listening, at some point we see through that something is has failed, or something is not working here, and we realize that we have a feeling for that something is not right, and that makes us question things, which is a great thing. And yeah, that's what we're here for. So anyway, time is up. So thank you for listening. Thank you for joining. And so we have these talks every Monday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Swiss time, and you can join via Zoom, or you can also join here on Instagram. So thank you guys. Take care. Bye-bye.